time to be on our program. You know, recently we see more of your name in the news because you've joined the legal team of WikiLeaks, right? I mean, what have you been doing on that particular case, and can you share some progress as to what's happening?
The United States government is undertaking a serious criminal investigation of Assange and of WikiLeaks. And if they bring criminal charges, it will have a terrible effect on freedom of speech in America. This is the great test case of the 21st century. This is the Pentagon Papers case half a century later, and it's the test case involving free speech on the Internet. And it's the most important freedom of speech case we have in America today.
How many are on that legal team, including yourself?
The legal team is primarily in Great Britain because that's where he is. He's under arrest and awaiting possible extradition to Sweden. So I'm working with the British team. Altogether, it's probably 5 or 6 people, that's all. But we're keeping a very careful eye on what's going on in the United States. We always want to be prepared for every possible eventuality.
You know, so it is one case that we're keeping a close look because, again, as you mentioned, freedom of speech is at risk.
Always
as a result.
At risk, right?
So I'm really trying to keep an eye on what's going on, and we'll be watching your name in the news more as a result. But, you know, I was curious when we were preparing for this interview how your background is very interesting. You graduated from Yale, but you were the youngest member serving on the Harvard faculty.
That's right. Yeah, I was 25 when I joined the faculty.
25?
My students were older than I was. And I was scared. I mean, I was this kid from Brooklyn, very young, no experience. I had never been out of the country. And suddenly I'm teaching the future leaders of America, of the world. They're in my class. It was a little intimidating.
So this was right after you graduated. You just decided to go into full professorship.
Well, I waited for 2 years. I was a law clerk for 1 year on the United States Supreme Court, helping a justice write important decisions. But right after that, I came here to Harvard, and I've been here for 48 years.
Oh, my God. Let's not count the number of years.
I'm proud of it.
You look so young.
I'm proud of it.
Yeah. Interestingly, when you were a student at Yale, did you think to become a defense attorney or prosecutor? What made you get into this field? And
you know, I didn't have any lawyers in my family. I was the first person in my family ever to go to college. I come from a very smart but uneducated family. When I heard the word lawyer, all I thought of was criminal defense lawyer. I didn't know there were any other kinds of lawyers. And so I always thought I would be a criminal defense lawyer. I never thought I'd be a professor. But I've been very fortunate to be able to combine a teaching career and a career in court defending some of the most hated people in the world, also some of the most liked people in the world. My clients have ranged from, you know, Bill Clinton, who is probably one of the most admired and loved people in the world, to O.J. Simpson, who is not.
You know, looking in your room, it seems like you're surrounded by books.
Yeah.
How many books have you written over the years?
I've written 30 books. I'm now working on my autobiography, which is going to be a very long account of how the law has changed in the last half century, not only in the United States, but all around the world, because I've had cases all over the world. So it's a biography of the law as seen through the eyes of one person who's been fortunate enough to be involved in most of the most important cases of the past half century.
So your autobiography will have some summary or recap of those
all of the cases, yeah, all the important ones. Yeah.
Great. I'm looking forward to that.
So am I.
Yeah. You know, one of the book is The Best Defense that you wrote. And when I think about this book, what comes to mind is that you say, in a court of law, the best defense is the best defense.
That's right. You have to be aggressive. You have to be upfront. You have to control the situation. You have to know the evidence better than the prosecution. You have to be doing as much investigation as they're doing. You can't wait for them. You can't be reactive. You have to always be proactive.
So what are some of the methods that you apply?
Science, mostly science. What I do is I immediately hire the best scientists in the world to do scientific analysis of everything. Science is the best way to the truth, and it's the best way of demolishing falsehoods on the other side. So I've had, for example, over 30 murder cases, homicide and attempted murder cases, I've won most of them. I've lost only 2. And almost all that I've won through the use of science, either by using science to prove my client innocent or by using science to disprove the other side's case.
I mean, let's talk about some of the cases that you handle, and they are very high-profile cases. The first case that we want to discuss is
Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson.
The worst
Tell
case.
us back to the history and tell me about what happened. What was he guilty of? What was he accused of?
It's the worst case of injustice I've experienced in my career. Mike Tyson was a great boxer. He was the world champion. And he had access to women whenever he wanted them. Women were sending him tapes, auditioning for him, throwing themselves at him. And he went to the Miss Black America contest in Indiana, and this young woman sat down on his lap and invited him to go out with her. And he called her at 3 o'clock in the morning. You don't call somebody at 3 o'clock in the morning to go to the movies. There are no movies at 3 o'clock in the morning. And she willingly went with him to his hotel room. There was a bathroom she went into. It had a lock and a telephone. If she didn't like what she saw, she could have locked herself in the bathroom, called operator, police would have been there in 30 seconds. No. She had sex with him. She was on top. She could have left at any time, and she left. She then found out that her father was coming to town, and she had had a previous experience some years ago. She had had sex with the quarterback of the football team, and her father found out about it. And her father said, "Why did you have sex with him? I'm going to beat you up." And she said, "He raped me." She made it up. And so the father said, "We're going to call the police if he raped you." And finally she said, no, he didn't rape me. So she was terrified that her father would beat her up if she found out he had sex with Mike Tyson. So she said again, "He raped me." It worked the first time. So she did it the second time. And Mike Tyson went to jail for a crime that didn't occur. There was no crime.
Well, let's look at this gentleman here.
Klaus von Bülow.
All right.
Yeah.
I think we have a movie based on him, too, and
We
his
do.
story.
It's called Reversal of Fortune. When I took that case, everybody said there was no way we could win. Everybody thought he was guilty. Everybody thought he deserved to be convicted. And we just started the case all over again, looked at the science, and discovered the whole case was based on false science. There was no insulin on the needle. There was no insulin in the case. There was no insulin in her body. By retesting everything, we proved his innocence. And we got the conviction reversed, and then a jury took a very short time, acquitted, unanimously acquitted. He went free. He's living in London, having a good life.
That must have felt really, really good, right?
Very good.
So that was a difficult case. When he was first found guilty,
I was not his
represented
lawyer
him.
when he first found guilty. I came
right.
in after he was found guilty,
Right.
and we got it
you
reversed on appeal.
overturned that on appeal.
Right.
Good for you.
He thinks so.
Well, let's look at the third case. Of course, we're all familiar with this one. O.J. Simpson.
The most controversial case in modern American history.
Case of the
Most
century.
most people think he was guilty. Some people think he was not guilty. The passions around the case is so strong. If he's guilty, he's a horrible, horrible murderer who killed 2 innocent people.
But the physical evidence all amounted to him being guilty. Anybody could see that. I mean, obviously, this was, once again, another television drama. Everybody saw
There was a mountain
what
of
was
evidence.
going on.
The question is, was the evidence real or was it faked? And let me tell you what
Or was
happened.
it planted, right?
It was
only
planted.
the bloody glove.
Well, let me tell you what happened. The glove is one thing, but there was a sock. And what happened is they found his sock splattered with blood, his blood and the blood of his victims. The problem was the blood on the sock had a chemical on it, EDTA, which is a chemical that's used in test tubes to prevent blood from coagulating. It's not found in the body. So we were able to prove that that sock, the blood on the sock, had been planted. And the jury, once they saw one piece of evidence planted, they said to themselves, if we can't
Reasonable
believe
doubt,
this,
right.
how can we believe the rest of the evidence? And so they acquitted.
So that's what it takes.
Doubt.
Having one juror have a doubt.
Well, in this case, 12 jurors had a doubt. All 12 had a doubt. Very quick doubt. They didn't deliberate very long. They didn't trust the government's case. They didn't trust the government lawyers. they didn't trust the government police, and they didn't trust the case. That's why we have juries. Juries are supposed to use their common sense to see whether we trust the government.
And the job of a good defense attorney is to make sure that one juror or the majority of the jurors have that doubt in their mind.
That's right. And the way to put the doubt in their mind is through science, through questioning, challenging the science, using science. Jurors love to hold a test tube in their hand, to look at a piece of physical evidence, to evaluate the truth of what a witness said. And when you give them that opportunity, generally they show common sense.
It appears to me that you really enjoy this.
I love it.
I mean, bringing science into proving your client's innocence.
And that's what I teach,
But that
too.
is very challenging, isn't it?
Very challenging, but I teach it. One of the reasons I came to Harvard is they wanted me to specialize in the interplay between law and science, law and social science, law and psychology, law and psychiatry, law and biology. I've taught courses in all of those subjects. Most recently, I taught a course in neurobiology and the law. Every time there is a developing science, I want to learn about it because I need to use that in my courtroom.
Sure, sure. Of those hundreds of cases you've handled over the years, is there any particular case that comes to mind mostly and that's most memorable to you, and why?
Yes. It was a man named Anatoly Sharansky. He was a Russian dissident, a Soviet dissident. He was in the Gulag because he simply wanted to exercise his rights, his freedom. And I identified very closely with him. I said to myself, there but for the grace of God and the foresight of my grandparents, I could be the one in the Soviet Union. My grandparents came from that part of the world. So I had a very close sense of identification with him, and we won the case and we got him free. He's now a very prominent international figure and a good friend of mine.
Well, let's change the topic a little bit. You know, President Obama is a graduate of Harvard.
That's right.
Also. Did you know him then? Was he
I
one
did.
of the students?
He was not in my class. His wife, I knew better, but I knew them both a little bit. You know, you get to know your students a bit.
Sure.
I knew him because he was president of the Law Review. We then renewed our acquaintance when he was running for the Senate in Illinois, and again when he was running for president, and I saw him most recently this summer.
So you do maintain that contact.
A little bit.
Yeah. Did you, when you knew him a little bit, when he was a student at Harvard, did you have your eye on him, like, you know, have some kind of a feeling like, okay, that guy can go far?
Everybody did. Everybody knew that this guy was a leader. How far he could go, you know, everybody says, oh, he's going to be president, but that almost never happens. In this case,
He did.
it happened. Yeah.
So when you teach your students, what kind of lessons do you emphasize the most?
I tell my students, I'm teaching them now how to practice law 50 years from now. I don't want to teach about the past. I don't even want to teach about the present. I'm looking to the future. Everything I teach them is something that will be relevant to them when they practice law when I'm long gone. The great thing about a teacher is, I don't know if anybody else has an afterlife. I don't know whether there's life after death. I have no idea whether there's heaven. I don't know. I know this. A teacher has an afterlife because he teaches his students. And his students continue in the tradition that the teacher teaches. A person who writes a book has an afterlife because the book remains on the shelves. A person who has wonderful children and grandchildren, as I do, has an afterlife. That's the kind of afterlife I'm looking for.
You're right. I mean, in Korea, we have a saying, you may die, but your name remain forever.
That's right.
And that's
right.
exactly what you're saying. I can identify
yeah,
that,
yeah,
yes.
It's a good saying. I like it.
Yeah. You know, many law school students, and even those practicing attorneys, they probably come across at one time or another at a crosspath, whether to become a prosecutor or a defense attorney.
Sure.
You told me earlier that you were very certain. The only thing that you knew how would be criminal defense attorney. But I'm sure your students come to you asking for advice.
Oh, they do.
Professor, what do I do? What should I do? What do you tell them?
Well, I tell them that they have to do something that they feel passionately about. They shouldn't necessarily do the thing they're best at, but the thing they're most passionate about. They should be good at it. They can't do something that they're passionate about that they're not qualified to do. But passion's very important. Passion is not only for the bedroom. It's for the courtroom. It's for the classroom.
Yes.
Passion is the key to a successful life. Doing everything with real passion.
Do you find that those students who come to you for advice, many of them, especially when they graduate from Harvard, they wait to become a corporate lawyer.
Too
They
many.
dream of making money right away, right? But do they come to you seeking advice like, what if I work for a nonprofit organization? Defend those poor who can't defend themselves.
Well, I
What do you
urge
tell them?
students to do at least part of their career helping the poor. The problem is that students at Harvard, the tuition is so expensive, and we give them loans, and so they end their law school career owing sometimes $100,000 or more, and they have to make money. And so the lure of the corporate firm is very powerful, and it's very hard to tell them, look, go into nonprofit, help the poor. Well, what about my loans? Well, you have to pay your loans back. So we're trying to have programs at the law school where we forgive loans or postpone loans if people go into pro bono work on behalf of the poor. I hope we'll do more of that.
We have some viewers that want to ask you questions too,
Sure.
so let's listen to their first.
Oh, great.
Do you believe the law is fair to all?
Absolutely not. The law is not fair to all. It's much easier to have the law be fair to you if you have resources, if you're wealthy, if you're famous, if you're attractive. The law has a long way to go before it achieves the kind of equality that we claim the law should have.
Must exceptional defense attorneys represent most evil people? Criteria for good lawyers and bad lawyers?
The job of a lawyer, a criminal lawyer, is to defend everybody. Nobody should be without a lawyer. That's our system. Whether you're the most heinous mass murderer in the world or somebody who's been falsely accused, you have to have a lawyer because nobody knows whether you're guilty or innocent until the case is over. So a good lawyer is one who'll take on any case, just like a good doctor is one who'll take on the most challenging cases, and with only using ethical and legal means, try to do the best they can for their client. A bad lawyer is a lazy lawyer. A bad lawyer is one who puts his own interest before that of the client. A bad lawyer is a coward. A good lawyer is the opposite of all of that.
You recently published a book on terrorism.
Right.
What's the name of the book?
Why Terrorism Works.
Why Terrorism Works. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm very concerned that we haven't condemned terrorism enough, that we facilitate it, we encourage it, we reward it sometimes. Just most recently, Israel had to exchange 1,000 terrorist prisoners for one soldier. That's rewarding terrorism. That's encouraging people to go out and kidnap more and do more terrorism. So terrorism works because we don't do enough to stop it, and we reward it.
What is a justifiable first strike? I think you have a book
I have
on
a book
that
called
too?
Preemption.
Preemption. Okay.
If a country is about to strike you first, you have the right to disable it. Now, that can be a slippery slope. For example, the reason Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941 is they claimed they were afraid that the United States would get into the war and strike them. So could we, the United States, have struck Japan first to prevent them from striking Pearl Harbor, and then can they strike us? It's a very, very difficult question, and lines have to be drawn, criteria have to be set up, but no country, knowing that it's about to be attacked, would ever wait for the bombs to drop on its civilians. Obviously, they would do whatever they could to stop it from happening in advance.
So we have to defend ourselves before the terrorists defend us.
That's right, and that concept goes back to the Bible.
But that's,
and
as you said, that's a very difficult concept
It's very difficult.
to justify.
it's difficult to live with, it's difficult to live without.
And that also involves political influence, too.
Political judgments. Some people think that Roosevelt wanted Japan to attack the United States because he was anxious to get into the war. I don't believe that, but you never know what politics dictate about when a war begins.
Sure. Well, let's switch the topic a little bit and then make it a little bit lighter.
Good.
Students come to you for advice, not just on legal matters,
They do,
but
yeah.
on life as well. And what kind of advice do you give your students when they ask advice on life?
Well, I'll tell you an interesting story. So my wife is a PhD in neuropsychology and very used to adolescent issues and So a few years ago, I can't identify the person more than by his ethnicity, but a young man from a Korean background came to see me, and he was crying. He was very upset because I had given a midterm exam, a test. It didn't count. It was just a practice exam, and he got a B+, which is a very good grade.
Good.
A B+. He was crying. He had never, ever gotten less than an A, and he was dishonoring his parents, who had worked so hard to send him to Harvard Law School, and he was really sick about having to dishonor his parents. And we invited him to dinner. My wife and I, we sat down with him and talked about how he's not dishonoring his parents, that he is doing as best he can, that he's in a very different place, Harvard Law School, where everybody is brilliant, and a B+ is a very, very solid grade. The end of the story, of course, is he got an A at the end of the semester, but he was so upset. And so you meet students who get upset when they get a grade like that. You meet other students who aren't working as hard as they should be working, and you have to give them advice about that. You have students whose parents have told them what to do in life, and they want to break away from that and do what they think they want to do. So there's all kind of advice that's necessary. And, you know, I give my advice based on my long experience with lots of students, and with my own family and my own children, who I'm very proud of.
Yeah, since you mentioned the Korean-American student as an example, it is true. In our Korean-American community, there have been a lot of cases where students have committed suicide.
We were very worried about that. In this case, we were worried about it. He didn't appear to be that dangerous, but he was very worried. He was terrified about dishonoring his parents, and we had to be concerned about that because, look, human life is the most precious possession in the world. Grades, you know, are not important, and there's no worse way of dishonoring a parent than by killing yourself. And people have to understand that you can deal with every issue. Just choose life. Do it in a positive way. Interact with your family. You know, it's not just one community that has that. Many communities feel very strongly. The community I grew up in, the Jewish community I grew up in, our parents wanted us very much to succeed. And I think there are tremendous similarities between Korean American communities and Jewish American communities. I see that similarity all the time. Parents who are very anxious for their children's success and sometimes push very hard, and children sometimes reacting positively, often reacting positively. I reacted very positively to the parents' pressure that I got, and some react a little less positively. You have to know your own children. You have to know your own family.
The parents just can't force their dreams upon their children.
No.
Yeah.
Especially, I know when I grew up, my mother was very frustrated. She had to drop out of school. She couldn't afford to go to school, and she tried to live her life through me. And that wasn't healthy. It helped me because she pushed me very hard, but it wasn't healthy for her, in fact.
You know, you have some personal philosophies in your life that you've been following, I'm sure. So can you share some of that with our viewers?
Well, my main personal philosophy is do everything with passion. Feel strongly about what you're doing. Throw yourself into it with great enthusiasm. You know, first, do no harm. Try to help people. Understand how lucky we all are. You know, we're not smarter than the grandparents who came before us. We're just luckier. And we owe an obligation to our ancestors to do right by them. We owe an obligation to our children. We live in a multi-generational life. That's a blessing. To have my mother died at 95 just 2 years ago. It was a blessing to have her alive for so long. My children are a blessing. Life is a blessing.
How many children do you have?
3 and 2 grandchildren.
Great. Well, thank you so much. In addition to discussing your career in this field and also your professorship, mentoring a lot of students, I think I've learned something more personal about you, and I'm going away knowing that everything we do in life, we need to have passion.
Yes.
And that's something I'm going to walk away with.
Well,
so
thank you
very
so much
for your time.
Good.
Thank you. Today we had some real talk with Ellen Dershowitz, an attorney at law who is and will continue to seek justice despite how many overwhelming evidences will be compounding against them. So it got me to thinking, in everything that we do, we must maintain our passion and do everything we do with passion and hope that everything will turn into a positive result. So that's all on today's Real Talk. I'll see you next week.